the night of the 10th of Muharaam, the evening before the death of our beloved Imam, Imam Hussayn alayhi salam. And we've been speaking about various steps toward Islah and following in the footsteps of our Imam, Imam Hussayn, to rectify and put our community and our souls, our own souls, in order. We've talked about the need for a unified communal vision and the steps that we should take to try to achieve such a vision, so that we can begin to put the world in order, to do a global Islah. And we've seen indeed how large the challenge is and how difficult the challenge is. Reforming the soul is difficult work. The lower nafs, the ego, the lower desires, the animalistic, internal animalistic urge, or what we might say the inner Yazid, it rages against our attempts to try to put it in a cage, to try to subdue it. Our stomach cries for more food even though we're full. Our ego wants to feel pride in winning yet another argument with a loved one, a friend, a family member. Our eyes, they lust for another glance. Our lack of self-confidence pushes us to buy the next hot gadget, the newest pair of shoes, the newest electronics. All the while our bank account says no, don't do that. Our body just wants to relax. Come home from a day of work and we just want to sit and watch Netflix. And our mind is tired. It has no desire to study. It has no desire to focus in prayer. And even when we are tired, and it is time for us to sleep, and it is appropriate to rest our mind and to rest our brain, then our mind says just a few more minutes. A few more minutes of Facebook. A few more minutes of Snapchat. Just another movie. Just the last quarter of the game. And then the next day is ruined. Can't wake up for Fajr. We're lethargic throughout the day. We're unproductive at work. We're unproductive at school. We can't pay attention in class. And we feel like a sack of contradictions. Whims pull us each day in different directions. We feel like we lack direction. We feel like we lack discipline. Reforming our community is difficult work. Hours of writing proposals, mission statements, vision statements, perhaps writing grant proposals. The emails, the phone calls, the WhatsApp messages, just to set a time for the meeting in the future. The long drives in the traffic, the long meetings themselves, the planning sessions, and the natural disagreements that occur with our brothers and sisters. We struggle with holding back from agitation and argumentation, backbiting, and the souring and dissolution of our relationships with our peers, our brothers and sisters in the community. We struggle with finding a way to listen to a critique or to listen to an opinion that differs from our own and take it with humility and to take it seriously. Not burning out when things get complicated and life gets tough. And we struggle with maintaining a balance between our community, organization function, and the lives of our families at home. Changing society is difficult work. We feel like we are swimming upstream against a raging river. We may feel judged by society, by our peers at home, our peers at work, rather, our peers at school. We may not know or may not understand which direction our children are going in. They're into the next latest fad that society has pumped out, or that Hollywood has pumped out. They're into the next new identity that arises in our culture. So sometimes we feel alone. Sometimes we feel powerless. Reading the news and watching the latest viral videos used to light a fire underneath us and inspire us to rage against the machine. And now, reading the news creates apathy. How on earth will the world get any better? How can I alleviate poverty in the world when I have no money of my own? Recycling a few bottles is not going to save the earth while corporations dump sewage. I can't influence public policy, especially not during the turmoil of the Trumpian regime. The 1% will always reign supreme. I'm not enough. My family isn't enough. My community feels disorganized. All the while, I need to pay my own bills. But we must put in work. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Imran, Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannah walamma ya'lamu Allahu alladhina jahidu minkum wa ya'lamu sabirin. Do you suppose that you would enter paradise while Allah has not yet ascertained which of you have struggled, jahadu, have done jihad with your souls, have done jihad fi sabilillah? Have you supposed that you will enter paradise when Allah has not ascertained whether or not you are one of the sabirin, you are not one of the steadfast, one of those with patience and perseverance? The point of this verse is to indicate that Allah will put us to trial. Allah will put us to test, sometimes severe test. And that it is how we react to that test, how we react to the everyday, day-to-day, daily turmoil in our lives that defines who we are. It is the way we react that decides, are we up to snuff? Can we enter the paradise with Muhammad wa ali Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Did we succeed, or were we too spiritually weak? Were we too spiritually lethargic? Were we too lazy? We must struggle and we must put in work even when the result of our work is not immediately apparent to us. It's not immediately apparent in this world. Now, of course, that doesn't mean kind of work willy-nilly. We should organize and we should strategize and we should work toward bearing fruit of our struggles, of our organization's labors, of our own labor in this life. We should work toward making the world a better place, making our communities better places, and making our souls like the soul of Hussayn. But things may not happen immediately. You may set your alarm over and over and over and not be able to wake up for Fajr. You may write grant proposals and not receive positive feedback. You may work to create an alliance of socially conscious groups and then the alliance falls apart. But we must have a long-term vision. And we should abandon the microwave mentality that is so common amongst us. Don't give up. Whether it is struggling to raise a righteous family, or struggling to make an intellectual argument against one of the hollow moral propositions of our day. Whether it is struggling to wake up for Fajr daily, or whether it is writing the bylaws for a fledgling institution. Whether it is struggling to provide for your family, or it is organizing a social justice movement. Even if the fruits of your labor don't seem to be on the horizon, don't give up. This is the story of Karbala. An Imam who is the son of a martyr. An Imam who is the brother of a martyr. Often, if you know of any social activists, you'll look at their children, you'll see that their children have fallen out of social activism altogether. Their children feel like they've been burnt out. But here is Imam al-Hussayn, son of a shaheed, brother of a shaheed, somebody who knows the reality of death, who knows the reality of shahada, who knows the repercussions of standing for truth, but he is not burnt out. He was an Imam who, from Medina to Mecca, and then Mecca to Kufa, was told by everybody he came across, don't go. It's not worth it. Don't sacrifice your life. But Hussayn marched on. They wanted him to lay low. They wanted him to have a quiet life. But Hussayn, he marched on. On his way to Kufa, as we spoke about the other night, he finds out that his envoy to Kufa was slaughtered, beheaded, thrown off the top of a building. He found out 13 days or 14 days into his march to Kufa from Mecca that the Kufans had abandoned him. That's what Azdak said, their hearts are with you, but their swords are against you. That turned out to be a reality. Yet he still marches. He is diverted from his way by 1,000 cavalry. But he still moves forward to Kufa. And he is forced to move to Karbala. And once he reaches Karbala, and Ibn Sa'ad's army reaches Karbala, he is a man with 100 soldiers. Some say less, 72 soldiers, the famous number. And they are facing thousands, minimum 4,000 soldiers. Yet his head remains high. His purpose remains clear. It's not clear to us, looking at history, what is going to be the fruit of this revolution. It's not clear what materially will come of this, except for death. But Hussayn knew better. And it is not just the Imam. It is not just, if we want to be cynical, the superhuman Imam. It is his companions, his family, the quote-unquote regular, non-ma'soom people in his camp. On the eve of Ashura, this night, the Imam realized that everything was going to end. And he gives a speech to his camp and he tells them, your obligation is finished. You're free to go. If you leave, it is not abandoning. I'm giving you permission to go. Save yourselves. He tells those who are related to Muslim ibn Aqil, Muslim's life was enough. Do not give any more sacrifice for your family. That Muslim's life was enough. None of them left. None of them left. They remained with their Imam. And instead, for the rest of the evening, the camp was busy. Some tents were busy gathering the war efforts, sharpening swords, making sure everybody who was going to go out into the battlefield had armor, making sure the horses were set with their armor, the saddles straightened. In some tents, people were busy making dua all night. They knew their life was going to end over the next day, over the horizon, and so they repented from any sins they may have had. And they asked Allah for strength and the ability to fight bravely and fight effectively on the battlefield. And in many of the tents, in some of the tents, you hear the buzzing of the lips of those who are reciting Quran. It's not just the Imam, it is all of those who went out with the Imam, who had pure souls. Imam al-Hussayn, up to the morning of Ashura, the morning of, just before the battle, continued calling the enemy toward righteousness. This was not a battle of vengeance. He wanted them, he was fulfilling his duty to bring them back to his side, to bring them back to truth. It is said in some of the books of history that he said to the enemy army, "Slow down, woe unto you. When you disliked us and you abandoned us, then you prepared for war. But the swords are not yet unsheathed. The hearts are still calm. The decision for war is not yet settled. But you have rushed toward us like a swarm of locusts and have attacked us like insects. Woe unto you, for you are indeed the tyrants of the Ummah." Here the Imam is trying to remind them to shake their souls into obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To shake their souls to recognize His right as the Imam. To shake their souls at the very least into understanding that I was called by you. You told me to come. And now you abandon me? At least sheathe your swords. Leave us be. But we know that's not what happened. We know that Al-Hussayn was slain. The material results of the march to Kufa to save Islam from the tyranny of Yazid was not immediate. The material results of our work may not be immediate. We may work all of our lives for a particular cause. We may sacrifice for our children and they don't turn out the way we think they ought to. We may work all of our lives to attain a certain level of knowledge or to attain a certain level of piety, and we may not quite make it. But don't give up. For the slaughter at Karbala set the stage for a later religious revival. It created a sense of guilt in the Ummah that helped people to recognize the rights of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. It removed the guise that the Umayyad regime had created for itself, the religious guise that Muawiyah put on, showing himself as the caliph of the Islamic community, that Yazid then inherited. Al-Hussein's movement removed that guise that the Ummah had kind of fallen in trance toward. And it was Sayyidah Zainab, Salamullahi alayha, that was the key to this piece of the puzzle. As she spoke to the Caliph Yazid after the slaughter at Karbala and had made him reckon with what he did, that you have killed the grandson of the Prophet. Because isn't it an interesting thing that only weeks after being marched from the plains of Iraq, from the plains of Karbala, all the way to Damascus, that Yazid let this family go? Why didn't he keep them imprisoned? He could not keep them imprisoned because the Ummah was now in a state of riot, in a sense. People heard the stories from the soldiers who killed and slaughtered Al-Hussayn, and they didn't react saying, wow, the Umayyad army has done an amazing thing. They reacted in revulsion and disgust. And so Yazid realized his position as caliph was now going to be compromised. So at the very least, he had to release the family who survived Al-Hussayn. Al-Hussayn's revolts paved the way for later revolts under the Umayyad regime. For the 22 years prior, there had only been one revolt under Muawiyah, and that was from the Kharijites. And the Khariji cause wasn't something that the Ummah favored. It wasn't something the Ummah as a whole could get behind. But there were 8, 9 revolts in history after Al-Hussayn's revolt that, though they may not have succeeded, and though they may have not always been for completely righteous causes, they at least show that there was a shaking of the Ummah as the fruit of Al-Hussayn's revolt himself. We have some ahadith that indicate that after Al-Hussayn's slaughter, there was only a handful of Shia left. Some ahadith indicate as low as 4. But in In the wake of this revolution, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad,
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad,
is now established as the son of Shaheed. Shaheed Hussayn, his son, now is famous for that. And he is the next Imam, of course. And so he spends the rest of his life teaching people about Muhammad wa ali Muhammad through his Sahif al-Sajidin, through his dua. He didn't revolt like Hussayn because now he was in the process of community building. Now, if we were in the shoes of Hussayn, we wouldn't have seen this coming. We wouldn't have seen that the Shi'i community would then begin to grow thereafter, because our view is narrow, our view is short. But after Hussayn is when the Shi'i cause, the Shi'i identity begins to pick up steam. The tragedy became a turning point for the development of Islam as a whole. And again, it shook the foundations of Umayyad Islam, quote unquote, Islam. And then you see thereafter various religious revivals and spiritual revivals amongst the Ummah that comes after in the wake of al-Hussayin's martyrdom. And as we spoke about in the first discussion, the later Imams, after Imam Sajjad, even beginning with Imam Sajjad began doing ziyarah to Hussayn in Karbala. He was the first to visit the grave of his father, to visit the grave of his family members who were slaughtered at Karbala. And then the later Imams, they command people, go visit Hussayn, as we spoke about earlier. They commanded the followers of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad to have secret gatherings in which they would do lamentation poetry to keep the Hussaini cause alive. This is why the ulama, they say that Muharaam and Karbala is what saved Islam. This is why the ulama, they say that this Hussaini movement is what keeps people religious, is what keeps the Hussaini cause alive. And indeed, many ulama say that it is the Hussaini message that keeps the tyrants on their toes. So brothers and sisters, I beg you to dream. I beg you to rise above our own defeatism, our own brokenness. If you're tired of the way the world is, then at least let us all meet our God saying, I made a good faith, concerted effort to change things. Leave the results to Allah. He will take care of the results. No one ever knows what the results will be. People can never estimate, they can never predict what history will unfold into. A small, marginal idea could become a very large idea in history. So don't think of the results. If we think in terms of empirical data, then we're not dreamers. If we measure things in our world today, we will feel an overwhelming sense of defeatism. Because looking at the ground in front of us, it doesn't seem there's any point. There's no point to anything. We are overwhelmed at every front. But our hero, our guide, our Imam, he did not give in to empirical odds. So let us turn our minds and let us turn